Hello and welcome to another episode of the CAYACast. Today we've got Jared, we've got Mila, who is currently at her laptop, and we have our special guest today, Bells. Bells has been a part of the CAYA family since the very, very beginning, since before we launched with One Shot in collaboration with Art. We have worked together subsequently in various different ways, and it's really cool to see the way that Art is coming back. We chatted about what the industry needs from us as creative communities. We chatted about community. We chatted about collaboration. We chatted about all my favorite buzzwords.
All the best buzzwords.
We chatted about where art is going, education, filling knowledge gaps. It's a jam-packed episode as usual, and you should definitely keep watching. Thanks so much, and we hope you enjoy the episode. Straight down the barrel. As much as possible, shuffle.
Okay, there we go.
Wonder how loud that. Yeah, I hope not. Anyways,
I think we should just address it like every podcast from here onwards. There will be construction.
there may be. We've asked. It sometimes doesn't go that well, but anyways, we are back with another episode of the CAYACast. Bella, we do the intro at the end.
Okay.
Because
cool.
then we actually know what we've talked about. But
cool.
Today we are very lucky to have Bella Devine on the podcast for our final episode of Women's Month. And Bella, why don't you introduce how the relationship between you and CAYA came to be as context, and you can go into art as it was then, and then that can lead,
Cool. So we're basically BFFs right now purely because of the relationship we had at the beginning of Art and CAYA. I think we pretty much started at the same time as CAYA. Art and CAYA were like babies at the same time, and we found each other just by chance at the same time, and then decided that we wanted to create a platform for other creatives in a medium that kind of suited us both. So art was primarily focused around photographers and uplifting and spotlighting creatives, but primarily photographers in Cape Town. And CAYA was keen to create a space for them, like a tangible physical space. And we made something called One Shot, which is still so funny to see my face. Also my different hair color. That's probably my favorite part.
What was your hair color?
That's where I know you from.
I have a different hair color.
Trying to be like, I know this chick. I know her.
I've heard your name a lot of times.
I'm hoping in good
this
context.
is the first time I can put a face to a name.
My face.
No, in terms of like Bradley speaking in the studio. Go there, that spells work or this and this and this. Yeah, this is the first time I've actually realized who you actually are.
This is my face. Oh, you know my face.
Well, as you can see, sometimes people know guests, sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that was very much our fetal phase.
And growing together and figuring shit out at the same time, which was wild.
No, 100%. And I mean, we're sitting here now and art has changed and CAYA's also changed in terms of our, initial focus with One Shot. When it was One Shot, we were just a studio. And we were just, like you said, trying to provide a place for photographers and videographers and podcasters in Cape Town. And that was very much one way we were trying to work with the photographic community. And such a cool way to do so in terms of the people that we did get to meet who, like you said, we've now been growing alongside in one way or another.
Even
and that's different for different people. Yeah, and brands.
The brands that we work with are lovely.
Yes.
And I mean, you guys still work with Candle now.
We do still work with Candle now.
Which is pretty cool.
And this episode will go out in time. So the Studio Candle fashion show is happening on the 3rd of September. I think tickets actually sold out for that, if I'm completely honest. Yeah,
That's
no,
insane.
it's go check if they're not, but I'm pretty sure. But there is also an after party, which is going to be fun, and we're going to be involved in producing the fashion show, but also doing the media around it. So that'll be fun. But those relationships do, have pervaded through time, and they've changed, but the photographers we work with, then some of whom we've, worked with in other projects. And
Lorcan
being the largest and most
original.
obvious of those examples. But yeah, talk us through what's happening with art now.
So she is getting on her feet. She is also currently being run by people all with full-time jobs, which I absolutely love for the creative side hustle, but also to try and do creativity sustainably. Like that's been such an interesting thing to have a baby that's yours. And like, with Kaya, but what I admire and love for you is that you make Kaya your work. I would love to make art my work, but she hasn't gotten those legs yet. So she's essentially changed more into an upskilling platform. So I'm quite keen on educating creatives that aren't doing a degree in it or aren't being welcomed into the industry maybe directly, by giving them the soft skills like how to brand yourself, what should you be charging for your work, do you understand how to market yourself in this way, like what can you be using social media for, like providing soft upskilling, creative, still founded in community, still very much kind of wanting to provide family or provide belonging in a space that feels very intimidating, but having that backbone of, okay, I'm still growing in the space. And then hopefully like the idea is to see if I can get internships or plug them with courses or anything, any possible kind of like job openings, see if I can connect with someone who can give them
sources of work.
Are you doing this because you feel like you didn't have that opportunity, or do you just feel like it's a problem in the creative space in a whole?
I think I wouldn't go like I don't want to. Originally when art was founded, it was founded from a place of being upset about the way Cape Town was structured, and I think bringing that negative energy into your kind of mantra also doesn't found it in positivity or like good energy going forwards. So not necessarily a problem, but like something I would like to tackle, because I think there could be more resources in the space that could help towards it. And community also has always been a weird thing for me. Like it's kind of been very sporadic and abstract as a concept. So I'm looking to make something that I would have loved when I was starting this. Yeah.
Random plug, but there's a group on Facebook called The Resource, which is quite funny that you use that term.
Yeah.
It's like a digital media job finding group, private group. So you have to apply.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you would definitely qualify, and then you literally just scroll through their feed. There's people posting, we need a photographer for this, we need a video. So I go and just tag Kaya and put our website and all of those things.
Nice.
But it's worth sharing that
resource
intended. Yeah, exactly. Because it sounds like it would really benefit your little community growing as well. Like and they also, all the jobs that are posted with salaries and things. So yeah, it's definitely worth applying for that. And I mean, it's a really cool space to like have a creative community of like digital media related job offerings, just being to like see what's out there in Cape Town. And I mean, there's some in Joburg and there's some in, so it's really cool to just have access to that kind of like scope of what's possible, especially if you're looking to like help other people find those jobs.
Yeah.
Where do you think the like education, for lack of a better word, is lacking the most? What do you think is the kind of knowledge areas that we need to improve access on in the Cape Town and in the South African scene, so that we can start seeing real kind of growth and establishment of the creative industry as a kind of major a real influence of culture and society in Cape Town and in South Africa, our own creative industries?
Yeah. I think like my biggest thing is as far as I've seen, like there's sometimes very hit and miss transfer of knowledge from people who have been working in the industry for years and know how everything works and what the culture of the space that they exist in looks like. Whereas kids who are getting in because they have a passion for photography or design or creative directing, like they have all these ideas, but not necessarily knowing where to start. Like the resource, for example, is kind of bridging the gap between these people here who have so much energy and drive to work and the people who are able to provide that work. So I think like part of that is branding yourself correctly. Like I am this kind of person. This is also finding your niche. Like I think there's such an expectation for creatives just to be able to do everything, you know? So for you to be able to be like, no, my niche is this and I specialize and I put hours grafting for this niche. It's a powerful thing to assert yourself and know where your boundaries and your powers lie when you're still really young in the industry, you know?
And to know your worth. I mean, so many people I know have been working for years, especially in photography, and completely undervaluing themselves and undercharging for their services. And then there's a whole bunch that like completely overcharge because they've just got the name, which is like not, I don't know, like that. that's a different side of it, and that kind of irritates me, just in the sense of, like know your worth goes both ways, I guess. And what your services is worth. But yeah, I mean, definitely seen a lot of people like undercharge for their and undervalue themselves, and then even when you are getting work and doing the work, it's not sustainable, and it's not doesn't like fulfill you, because you are like being fed something that's below your value.
And I think part of that's changing the narrative, you know, like I fully believe in working your way up to a position where you put the hours in, like doing the assistant work, making sure that you're helping out on shoots, whatever, and then getting to a point where you feel comfortable doing everything everyone else is doing, but knowing that you want to be there. Like you don't have to settle because the narrative has told you to settle, you know?
Yeah. What, I mean, mechanically, and mostly because, getting into the education and trying to help to bridge skill set gaps is something that we're also moving into now, as well as a part of what we want to do. So from a very legitimate point of interest, what does that look like for you mechanically? How do you, you know, wanting to educate people and broach skills gaps is, you know, all great as a concept, but in the practicality, what does that look like for you?
So I think the term soft skills really does define kind of what I'm targeting, because I'm part of art now is steering away from the photographic narrative. I'm kind of trying to appeal to anyone and everyone, because you all still value from the same soft skills, you know? So like, I think being able to understand how to, if you aren't doing creative work full time, how to incorporate that holistically into your day to day so that it's a sustainable practice is something that I'm really, really interested in, and something that I want to share with other people. So it's not like extreme and then burnout and then extreme and then burnout. Also doing it so you're producing work to build a portfolio so that you can start getting like signed by an agency, or you can start reaching out to other clients with this much body of work. So like mechanically for me, it's literally like, what is a brand? What is your niche? Do you like maybe even tapping into trends? Like, do you know what an NFT is? If not, this is how you could maybe benefit from it if you're a digital artist, you know? So it's more bringing attention to stuff that you don't think is necessarily important when you go into the game. And then when you realize that you're trying to actually be paid for what you're doing, other people need to see that you know more about you than they do know about you, you know? So it doesn't really help
and
in the mechanical
in terms
sense.
Of, like, are you wanting to distribute digitally? Are you wanting to do masterclasses, short courses? What are you thinking from that perspective? What's your...
Because the team's looking quite small at the moment, and again, because full-time work and trying to create sustainably, taking my lessons into practice for myself, we're kind of doing it like at the moment, because we had a space that was keen to host us on a weekly / like bi-weekly kind of session. And then we would do courses then where people would just pitch up, and then we would do like a sharing circle, but then there would be a driving intention, so like talking about this topic. And then otherwise we're going to do it pretty much digitally. So like using TikTok, for example, because that's just where everything is. And then, doing it on social media. So primarily Instagram and Facebook as well.
Cool. Well, we'll chat about a space afterwards because I have a couple of potential solutions for you.
Thank you.
See, this is why I love being involved in these podcasts. There's so much of I call myself creative for sure and an artist, but again, work life and like life and then like creative life. It's just, there's a lot and it's hard to find that balance. And then I find myself sitting on these podcasts and getting into really interesting conversations with people and like benefit so much from them. Like even just opening a conversation on a podcast about stuff, like you learning, you know,
we're finding solving
ways
problems.
you can solve each other's problems. And that's just like one in-person conversation between like, you know, people with similar interests and
but
like those.
And I think that's the point of the podcast as well, is for me at least, it's I get the incredible privilege of having these kind of conversations. And we, you know, we've all brought different people onto the podcast who we've had really incredible conversations with, you know, that have really added value. And like you said, that, you know, I've learned from, or you've learned from, you know, gotten something from. And for me, it's just we have an opportunity to share those conversations that we have with more people and share the value of a Bella or, you know, various other people we've had on the pod, share the value of their insight that we know they have with other people. So continue to like and subscribe.
Well, I was going to say, you know, can't afford therapy, start a fucking podcast. Because Jesus, it's like really.
Put that on a shirt.
You can't.
Yeah, guys, it's a new
start making
ad.
merchandise.
CAYA merch.
Because it seriously is so therapeutic to just have a space where you can talk about things. I mean, we've talked about so many different topics on here, and like I'm quite enjoying the creative industry side. So we'll get back to that in a moment. But even going into like, you know, the medical side with Dr. G and like a very spiritual side with Liv from the Vaginarium podcast, like that was awesome. And it's so cool that you get to
and talking about Miley
go
Cyrus.
so deep. And then talking about Miley Cyrus's love life for no bloody reason.
You know what? Balance.
What's her love life? Now I'm curious.
Balance and
talking
holistic.
about a divorce, and I mean.
Oh, I was like, she was married? Yeah, she was.
Pop
She was
culture.
married, yeah.
Pop culture.
Off topic. I'm so sorry.
Where did you grow up? Cape Town?
Yes, I am a Cape Town kid.
High school?
Springfield.
Stop asking boring questions.
I went to a convent, guys. Let's unpack
How's that worked out for you?
She's queer and she went to a convent. That was fun.
I mean, it does segue somewhat into what I wanted to, or actually Mila's point kind of segued into it, but we'll get into, I want to talk about that as well. In terms of the conversations that creating conversation spaces where we can have these kinds of conversations, and alluding back to some of the points you brought up earlier about how much you should be charging, you know, dealing with getting payment, all of these things are common kind of points of issue when we have these conversations with people in the creative industry. What do you think are the conversations that need to be happening the most right now in terms of the overall development of the Cape Town creative industry? What do you think we need to be talking about and finding solutions around that'll really have the most value in pushing our creative industry forward?
I think also why I love when we come together is because your brain's very like A plus B equals C. Like this is the linear kind of progression of things, and your brain just works fantastically different to mine. Because I'm like, I did a BA, you know, my thoughts are naturally airy fairy, and nothing that I say is pretty much linear. So if you ask the question, it automatically goes to like community, which is this very abstract,
broad
like
spectrum.
there's no, like my biggest thing is creating space for people, because this is actually how change comes about, and this is how there's knowledge transfer, you know. It's like I've been going to these musing sessions in Musenberg actually, which is kind of also steered how I'm going with art to a more holistically inclined direction. Is so it's this incredible human being who's been hosting these musing sessions at the Commons, who is basically opening space for people to bring their work there and to discuss like what it's like getting criticism and internalizing criticism, what it's like to create for yourself versus the audience. And she's actually a coach. I'm actually shout out Nicolene. She's incredible. And she coaches people how to work through like blockages, or what a creative journey looks like, or how to charge, like all of the things that we're kind of talking about, but centered from a holistic point of view. And I think it's also been really interesting to engage in that space in the Deep South versus, you know, Cape Town, CBD, because like I've really been on this journey at the moment trying to find like a more holistic side to the CBD, and I'm struggling to find that from a personal perspective. So trying to incorporate in my creative practices has been really interesting. And I think holding those musing sessions in Cape Town, where the like the location you're looking at was in Arbs, would be incredible, because I feel like so many people gravitate to that side of the world to get that. Whereas there's no spaces here that can hold that for you. So I'm kind of like, your space. I can see you smiling.
Guys, it's happening
again. Just you wait. Yeah.
This happens every fucking week.
What's it?
Miller,
10 for 10. Let's go.
So, yeah. Anyways, I was going to say something, but I'm actually just not going to.
Okay, fair enough.
What, I mean, speaking about the space that we need to be creating for the community, and we've got something or a few things in the works that hopefully will cater to aspects of that. But in the fact finding of doing that, who in particular are the people who you think need to have space created or held for them the most? Groups or whether it's a medium or, you know, who do you think needs the support the most at the moment?
I want to jump in and just go, surely that's it's about where you are as a person. Like each individual, the way you talk about it, it's a very conscious space. So if you're in this industry for maybe not such holistic reasons, it's not a space you'll find yourself in. But if you like, I don't know if you could pin that down to like a specific group of people or a specific industry, and more so like it's like where you at in your like creative and personal journey. It sounds like it's a place you'll find yourself when you like feeling a little bit lost and needing that community above and beyond like just the education around logistics, more like the education around like how to actually feel integrated into a community when you're in such a individualistic, because artists all stand as their own brand, you know, and it's really difficult to see yourself in a community of artists because they're technically your competitors. Yeah. So I think it's about breaking through that, like we're all competing against each other, and rather moving towards the community aspect of like, how can we all help each other improve all together and all move up into a level where the creative industry in Cape Town as a whole looks so much better, as opposed to like, how do I make it to the top and kind of leave everybody else in the dust? Because that can be a mindset a lot of people take.
Well, yeah, on a follow-up on that, and I would still be interested if there are groups that you think, because while there might not be an obvious or easy answer, I also want the thinking of trying to get there, even if there isn't a good answer. But also on that, I think one thing that you guys did with art in the early days that was really, really interesting was the photographer meets, and bringing together a whole bunch of photographers who often then were either featured in one another's work or working together on shots and shoots. And there were a couple of occasions where you did that, where it was to a large degree quite antithetical to what Mila's talking about, in the sense that it was really collaborative and people weren't looking at one another as competition.
Yeah.
But yeah, what do you think you were doing in those spaces that created an opportunity for people to create without feeling that it was a competitive space? And how can we take those lessons and push them forward into what you're doing with art now in terms of the education, what we want to do? What were the lessons that you took from that?
So I think also the lessons at the time, the lessons that I'm kind of going forwards with now differ a little bit. Like, I think the core theme has always been collaboration. And at the beginning, there was very much an emphasis placed on highlighting collaboration over necessarily like a monetary exchange, which was really something that I've had to reevaluate now, because obviously coming from a place now where this is full-time work and this being a side passion, it's like people also do get to deserve to be compensated to an extent, or compensated to a degree of whatever someone else can offer for the services that they're providing. Because I think it also incentivizes someone. Except exposure, because that was very much in the beginning, like you're going to get exposure, you're going to get to work with cool brands, you're going to get to work with cool people. This is the exchange in itself. And I still back that. I think that was an incredible thing that we were doing at the time and made sense at the time for us, and especially where we were at the time, you know?
No, of course. You got to start somewhere.
Yeah. And I think now, that narrative was let's collaborate, let's work together. And the model was literally everyone has to feed into everyone else to be able to produce a finished product. And the finished product in that case was an image, or, you know, a series of images that people were either having posted on brand Instagrams or social media, and that was something to show for it. Whereas now I think, like I said, I'm placing more of an emphasis on people being able to have an exchange for their services. So I'm thinking of creating this trading system, which I like a little bit more than money, because money is sometimes hard when people are in different places. But I'm still very much trying to push this narrative of everyone feeds into everything else that people create within the community. So part of the original model was doing exhibitions purely founded or purely kind of comprised of the work that people created together within the art group. So someone did creative directing, someone else did styling, makeup, lighting, whatever, for whatever you were doing. That was going to be showcased on behalf of the collective. So it's still very much like this is exposure, but also trying to build into the model people who would buy that work, because that's the other thing. Or even people who matter would see that work, you know, because that's the other thing as a creative. Like you're navigating, who you creating for? Yeah. You know, why are you creating? So lots of learnings from the beginning, still very much trying to include that into what we're doing now, but in a slightly different way. I think a more sustainable way. Yeah. You know,
100%. I want to quickly jump in before you do, Mills. Just to, I'm involved as well in curating a different space, which we haven't released yet, hence I'm not naming it. Okay. But you'll be able to find out about it. And
how soon, actually?
Supposedly early September. We'll see if it happens.
Big things coming. Keep your eyes
which is really exciting, and it's not CAYA, and it's a different side of things, and it's a different side of what I want to do within the creative industry and what we want to do with, in terms of how we push the industry forward. Because having a studio space that makes access to studio space more affordable is one thing, and having a production team that pushes the boundaries of how we're doing, event media or podcasting is another. But having a space where people in the creative industry can come and be in a space where their art and their work and the work of their community is valued, and they can spend time there and be creative in community there.
Like a hub.
Exactly, is exactly what we want to build. And it's, very much geared towards you're going to be able to buy art, and you're going to also be able to buy local products, buy, designers, and we've got a pottery team,
How much of this
all of
do you want to
these.
share? before?
I'm teasing. Relax.
Okay. I'm just making sure.
Yeah. No.
I feel like I might know what this is.
Yeah, I think
don't know. Maybe I do. Who
we've
knows?
chatted about it, but we'll chat about it in a bit more detail
Cool.
off the pod. But I think is exactly that. For me, it was realizing that with CAYA, we've been trying to build a community around the studio and the production company, which we have done.
Yeah.
Which has been great. But the unfortunate reality of the studio being our office and it being a studio is that it can't be a place that people come to when they want.
Yeah.
Because it's like, you got to book it off, or we've got to be in, or, it's got to be at a time where we're not working on other stuff.
Yeah.
And to have a space where it's premised around community, it's premised around celebrating and making creativity a viable business, prospect for people, whether that be artists or it's designers or jewelry makers or whatever, I think is, so I'm really glad you've touched on that, because I think it echoes what I feel is a common sentiment, which is we need spaces that are built for the creative industry, by the creative industry, by people who want to help push it forward. And I think that's what we want to do. I think it's what you want to do. And there's other collectives and groups and teams within the creative industry who, we're lucky to work with or be friends with, who, there's a very common sentiment around this community and collaboration over the last couple of years, which has been really, really encouraging to see. And I think it stems from there being several groups like us and like you guys who are pushing towards that and saying, hey, everybody, listen, we're much stronger if we are sharing with one another and helping one another than just competing outright. So yeah, it's really encouraging, and it's really exciting in a time where there's lots of other shit going on, which isn't as exciting. Sorry, Mila, I did cut you off. Unless you want to comment on that before we go down a different thread. You've been holding it in.
I think you deserve to speak now.
Okay. What I wanted to say was, because you asked Bella about creating or what she thinks goes into making those spaces where creatives are collaborating and not, or working together and not competing and not feeling that sense of competition. And I think you both touched on it, but just to be more specific, it is genuinely just about getting them in the same bloody room. Like you get everyone in the same room talking about what they're passionate about, and suddenly everyone is inspired. Everyone has new ideas, things they want to work on. They seeing how they can help each other, because you can do that for me, and then what can I do for you, because I can't pay you, but like we can, so it's that sense of the industry being quite competitive is because there aren't spaces like that. I think that's where the root of the issue is because there's a lack of like creative spaces where people can just go and be in the same room as other people who have similar interests, or not even like the same niche, but like niches that could benefit each other, photographers meeting up with a whole bunch of stylists or aspiring stylists, or like people who want to direct shoots but don't necessarily have the like technical photography skills, and they want to like collaborate and work with people. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't really like necessary that I said that in that moment, so you didn't interrupt me, but
wonderful.
But yeah, and I mean, you both touched on that aspect as well. I think that that competitive nature comes from
schools, like
it's everybody's doing it by themselves. That's why everybody's seeing everything on social media and Instagram, which just makes it look like everybody's doing more and better than you.
Yeah.
And then if you go behind the scenes with those people, you actually realize you're all fighting the same battles.
Yeah.
And that we can like in strengthening that community and the conversation around that can seriously develop and benefit the whole industry.
Yeah. 100%
synergy.
Agreed. Exactly.
Synergy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's important that we talk about it. It is Women's Month, and we wanted to use it to, use the time to focus, not that we don't at other times as well, but really draw attention to the experience of women in the industry. What has been your experience as a woman in the creative industry, as a queer woman as well?
Yeah.
How does that dynamic affect things? Do you feel there's representation? Do you feel it's improving? Do you feel there's opportunities? Do you feel that's improving? What's your sentiment?
I think my journey's been really, not hit and miss, but very like segmented. There's been periods of time where I've been like, this is my pluck, this is the soapbox I'm going to die on. And then others where I'm like, you know what, we're all just trying. Everyone's just trying to do their thing and get through it, you know? And I think part of the journey has been going to that place where you're like, why are all these male photographers taking pictures of women in swimming costumes? Why are there so many?
This like 2 episodes ago.
It's wild because the thing is, when you get a woman or a female presenting person to shoot another female presenting person, like the attention to detail is so different, and
You're
the way
not gonna
you
get a woman shooting another woman on the beach in a bikini.
That's the thing.
Very
Okay,
rarely.
I assisted on a shoot recently where that happened, and the energy on that shoot was immaculate. Like, it was very the sisterhood of that energy, and everyone kind of hyping each other up, and it being very peaceful, and no one necessarily expressing that same sense of like consciousness of their physical being and like, I don't feel comfortable doing this, and not being asked to do anything compromising as well. Like, very much empowering the models to be as natural and as creative in their own space and in that role as possible.
Yeah, I suppose at that point it doesn't really feel like you're on a shoot or you're working.
Not at all.
Yeah,
I went for a
having fun
swim
with the
half day.
girls.
I was like,
Exactly.
I'm just gonna have a swim. You know, and that is like a low key grievance of mine, but at the same time, like accepting that it's everyone's journey. So I'm trying also not to be negative or aggressive towards it. And I think being a queer creative as well is interesting because I feel like queerness in itself is an identity beyond a creative. So intersecting them and trying to figure out what my brand is, I'm speaking about brand so much and yet mine's so fluid, is also interesting because it's, I think, quite a thing to market yourself as that in Cape Town, you know? So it doesn't actually play a huge part in my creative practice. More so like I've been doing so many like job applications and shit recently, and my core theme is like social messaging. You know, I want to unpack uncomfortable topics in my work, and that doesn't necessarily always relate to my queerness. So I think yeah. Jinx.
Were you finished?
Yes, full stop. I think full stop.
Cool.
Yeah, I think in some regard, attaching your like sexual orientation or even like your gender to your work just defeats some kind of like I don't know. Personally, it feels, and I'm purely talking about like my own experience. I've also gone through different phases with my sexuality and don't have to put myself in a box at any point in time to feel comfortable. But I would never call myself like a queer creative. Like I'm a creative, and then my sexuality is entirely outside of that. And a lot of people and a lot of times there is space for those to be integrated. But I think when you attach it to your personal brand, it maybe loses a little bit of emphasis in both areas, or a little bit of the like weight it holds in both areas, because sexuality and gender expression and stuff is a very personal thing. And yes, being like forward about that and being comfortable with that and showing that to the world and in the way you express yourself is very important, and you know, can be very empowering, but that doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be a part of like the creative work that you do, and not to say that it's shouldn't be, like that's not the point I'm making, just make that clear. But when I think sometimes there's cases where external forces kind of push you for that to be your creative identity. Like, okay, you're now like not just an artist, sexual identity to the side. You are now a gay artist, and like that is your whole brand, and then there doesn't leave a lot of room for self-discovery within that, because like you say, it's very like those things are very fluid and often shift throughout your life based on different influences and different, you know, that process of self-discovery is a long and strenuous one.
I think it's that you always you'd want to be appreciated for your work, not because you are X or Y or Z.
Exactly.
You know,
like I don't want to be famous or famous is not the right word, but I don't want to be, you know, noticed because I'm a female something. I just want to be noticed because I'm like good at what I do, you know, like I like being hired because you're a woman and they need representation is like, well, fuck you know what I mean? Like hiring
it also
because
doesn't empower someone else.
Exactly. You know, and it just makes you feel like your work is never going to be good enough because it wasn't ever about that in the first place.
We need to wrap things up because we need to be on a Brooks call. So we are going to wrap things up very quickly.
Anything else you want to say?
Anything else you want to add
me.
on? Anything else? Or are you pretty
No,
sussed?
I'm just grateful to be here. I've enjoyed the chat.
Well, thank you for coming. It has been wonderful. It's been really cool to reminisce over the good old days and the full circleness of all of that coming into play in different ways now. So thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
If you watch this far, make sure you like and subscribe and do all the good things. Share, comment, you know the drill. Check Bells out, check Art out on Instagram and all the socials. And we will see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.